Now we go to part 3 of our week's report, People in the News, where we will analyze the Vedic astrology birth chart of a newsworthy person.
Since the Edward Snowden affair has seen some new developments which have larger implications for U.S.-Russian relations, we thought we'd take a look at his chart this week.
We did discuss him when he first hit the news cycle back in June, and we came up with a natal chart for him that looks like it fits. Edward Snowden, born on the 21st of June, 1983, in Elizabeth, North Carolina, and no birth time available. So we rectified his chart based on what we do know about his life up to this point, and we came up with approximately a 3 p.m. birth time.
This really seems to fit him. He's a Virgo rising. Virgos are good at details, good analyzers, and often a bit nerdy. They have their own way of doing things, which makes them a bit eccentric at times. The ruler of the first house, Mercury, which also rules the 10th house of career, is well positioned in the 9th house of good fortune. And despite never graduating from high school, he was making 6 figures before he bailed. And by the way, the 9th house is also foreign travel, which he did a lot of even before this current phase of his life.
Yeah, note that Mercury, the planet of thinking, is aspected directly and influenced by Uranus in his chart. Uranus, the planet of rebels and eccentrics, and that fits him surely. His 10th house is quite unique indeed, as it contains the Sun, ruler of the 12th house of espionage and self-sacrifice, and Mars, ruler of the 8th house of secrets, as well as having Rahu placed there. Rahu, the planet that rules underground or underhanded activities. He even referred to himself as a spy. The Sun is very powerful in the 10th house. It gives a person ruling power. Further, the Sun is the significator of authorities in astrology and the ruler of the 12th house of foreign lands in a Virgo chart, and this makes the Sun an indicator of foreign governments for Mr. Snowden. It is quite clear this guy was heavily tangled up with powerful forces.
On top of that, secretive Scorpio is in the 3rd house of skills, talents, and daily activities. And it contains a retrograde Jupiter conjunct the planet of modern technology, Uranus. This makes for some interesting skills and abilities, no doubt. It also makes him a bit of a self-promoter or even a braggart at times.
Yeah, Venus is the ruler of the 2nd house of family, as well as the 9th house of good fortune, and it is placed in the 11th house of gains and the elder siblings. He has one older sister who is a lawyer. In fact, the 9th house is the house of law, and Venus is a significator of lawyers.
In fact, that was one of the reasons why we went with this chart, because this was a known fact, and this was strongly confirmed. So we go on. Mars rules his 3rd house of survival and self-efforts, as well as his 8th house of secrets and research. And it is well placed in his big 10th house of career. Mars is also a natural malefic, and when it shows up in the 10th house of public deeds, it signifies that the person is capable of acts which make them infamous. He is now quite the notorious character indeed.
Yeah, and he speaks with a lot of gravity, serious emotion in those videos made of him. The planet Pluto is quite close to Saturn and the Moon, and is also there as well in his 2nd house of speech. So he's a serious guy. What he says has gravitas, and it sure seems like he is speaking truth to power. He has the attention of the public worldwide, the U.S. Congress, the White House, and the National Security Administration.
In the lunar zodiac, he has his ascendant degree in the lunar sign Chitra. This nakshatra likes to call attention to itself, also helps to make him good at technology and creating, thus his work with games, software structure, computer systems, and so forth.
All right, so let's take a look at some predictions here. We'll look at his planetary periods. First, a little bit of review of his past. Mr. Snowden enlisted in the Army May 2004, which was during his Saturn-Moon period. And we'll note that Saturn and the Moon are conjunct in the second house of values. Saturn is the ruler of his sixth house of service and defense, and the Moon is the ruler of his 11th house of goals and ambitions. So they came together during that Saturn-Moon period. Also, the Moon is in the lunar sign Vishaka, a rather militaristic nakshatra.
So note that Snowden was injured while in boot camp during his Saturn-Mars period, and though never confirmed, both his legs were broken in an accident during a training exercise. The Saturn period activated his sixth house of health and disease. Mars is a significator of accidents and occupies his 10th house with Sun and Rahu. Therefore, an unusual accident connected with his career happened at that time.
Okay, so now he is in his Mercury major period and Mercury sub period, which began in 2012. So Mercury period activates his first house of self, since the first house is Virgo, ruled by Mercury, and also his 10th house, Gemini, the house of public deeds and renown. Mercury is manifesting through its position in his 9th house, the 9th house of foreign travels, which is also, get this, the house of meritorious deeds.
Well, next up comes his K2 sub-period of his Mercury major period. That starts for him next year. His natal K2 is in his 4th house, which is not a happy placement. It makes you dissatisfied with your home and domestic life. Furthermore, K2 is in the nakshatra Mula, a lunar sign that is known for destruction and extreme change. I am betting he will be leaving Russia for greener pastures by the time his one-year temporary asylum runs out. As for the transiting planets, while all this is going down, Mars, Jupiter, and Mercury were all transiting in his 10th house, the planet of action. Mars plus Jupiter, the planet of enlargement, which together with Mercury gives big thinking, all together in his 10th house of public deeds, helped him participate in this dramatic and very public act which he undertook.
Yeah. Also, in another part of his chart, we see that he is currently in Sadhisati and Saturn return simultaneously. So both of these indicate a major turning point in his life on two fronts. The Saturn return, which is when Saturn comes back to its natal position, something it does for everyone at the age of 28 to 30, is interpreted as restructuring your life. And Sadhisati, in Vedic astrology, is when Saturn transits over your natal moon, a very serious time of having to essentially deal with reality. In other words, it's a double whammy for him and his karma this year.
And look at this. Venus has been transiting through his 12th house. Venus is a benefic planet. When it goes through the 12th house of the unknown, you can get benefits unexpectedly. Also, the 12th house is, once again, foreign places. So he benefits by being in foreign places like Hong Kong and Russia.
Yeah, so it looks like Mr. Snowden is right on time with his chart destiny.
One last thing, Ron. Since Snowden has brought this up himself on more than one occasion, that is to say, he fears for his life. So, Ron, what can we say about this astrologically? He speaks with conviction about this on this subject about being taken out. So I must guess that this is a legitimate concern for him, not some irrational sense of being spooked out by nameless dread.
Yeah, well, in Vedic astrology, we look at the 8th house and its ruler and the conditions in the 8th house to determine the mode of death. So Mars is the ruler of his 8th house. Mars is violence as well. And Snowden's Mars is in his 10th house, the house of, again, things that happen out in public. And it's tightly conjunct with Rahu in his chart. And Rahu is the significator of poisons.
Oh, and ironically, he is hanging out in Russia, where there's a very colorful history of taking out your enemies with poison. The mad monk Rasputin had cyanide-laced pastries served to him. The journalist Alexander Litvinenko had the radioactive isotope polonium-220 slipped into his cup of tea. And the Bulgarian dissident writer Georgy Markov received a dose of ricin through the tip of an umbrella jabbed into his thigh.
Really? Well, who knows, but perhaps the CIA knows some Russian mobsters or a double agent who's in need of a large payday.
Yeah, I'd say Mr. Snowden has every right to act with caution. Making advanced reservations to dine out at this time is quite ill-advised.
All right. We can only hope that things don't go so cloak and dagger for him.
With that thought in mind, I guess that will do it for this week. Be sure to join us, and we'll be back with another look at the heavens this next week.
Okay, David. Bye for now.